right. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Katie Sullivan. I am the minority leader for the House Democrats, and we have officially ended the 69th legislative session. I want to start by thanking the people of Montana for sending us here and putting their trust into us. It's been a long session, and we've worked hard to deliver on promises that we've made to the people of Montana, and I want to thank my fellow Democrats as well. As I've said before, and I'll say again, there are more of us here than there were last session. Montana sent 12 more Democrats to the legislature, and this has been a night and day difference. In January, Democrats came to this building laser focused on making life easier for people, on cost and affordability, for property tax relief, investing in our great Montana public schools, making housing more affordable, ensuring the safety of our communities, protecting Medicaid, removing barriers to health care, respecting the rights of Montanans to make decisions about their own bodies, defending workers, the right to have a union, and the right for a fair wage. Support small business, the backbone of our community, and ensuring Montanans' freedom to live the life they want to live, and in short, that's freedom, fairness, and affordability for all. Over the last 85 days, it has been because of the 12 more seats we've had in this building that Democrats have been able to bring these issues to the table, and the final product has been much better. Every step of the way, whether it's been on the budget, on schools, property taxes, Democrats have been here at the table representing everyday working Montanans and advocating for them. Now, this session has been far from great, but at the same time, everyday Montanans came out better this session than the last because more Democrats were here. In terms of freedom, this session, Montana Democrats stood firm in defending our fundamental freedoms under the Montana Constitution and our Montana way of life. We introduced legislation to affirm and expand our personal freedoms. Haver Representative Paul Tuss introduced a right to repair for farmers and ranchers to give them freedom to repair their own property without interference. But what has been clear this session is that Montana Republicans do not value freedom and independence for everyone. It's why one of their top priorities this session was dismantling our independent court system. Republicans control the governor's office, the House, and the Senate. The only thing standing in their way from trampling our rights and freedoms is the Constitution and the courts. So that's why, and that's where they took aim this session. And we are proud to say, because the people of Montana sent so many Democrats here, that all of those attempts were defeated. The Republicans brought 27 bills to take over and dismantle our courts, and we killed 21 of them. We killed the worst one, in our opinion, which is partisanship in judicial elections, not once, but at least 5 separate times, and there was a final attempt today. Republican leaders need to get the message. Partisan judges is deeply unpopular. Montanans want fair and impartial courts that are loyal not to any political party, but to the law, and Democrats will fight with them. In this session, when Republicans spent dozens and dozens of hours pushing bills to legislate every aspect of our lives, Democrats fought back. We heard Montanans in November when they clearly stated their support for the right to choose, and yet Republicans brought bills to force their views on us and restrict our access to abortion. We defeated some of the worst proposals, including House Bill 316, but the GOP still pushed many harmful bills on how to control the way we live and limit the decisions we can make. Republicans spent this session fighting to control our personal decisions, and Democrats listened to the people, and we fought back. Because nobody asked us for help figuring out which bathroom to use when we came to this session. We were sent to deliver solutions for property taxes, for public schools, and for affordability. In terms of fairness, Democrats have been committed to day one to fairness. Montanans are not asking us for the moon and the stars when we come to this building. They want a fair shake. They want a shot at the American dream. And under our multimillionaire governor and his Republican legislature, the gap between those at the top and the rest of us has gotten wider. And as parents and as educators, Democrats know that a fair shot in life begins with a free and equality education. While Republicans are committed to tearing down education and privatizing our public schools, Democrats have stood strong with students, parents, and educators. Major education wins, from boosting teacher pay to expanding opportunities for students with disabilities, would not have been possible without our bills or without our votes. We are able to introduce the Indian Education for All, implement Montana's constitutional mandate to teach Indigenous history and culture in schools with Senate Bill 181. We passed a bill to ensure no kid goes hungry in school with House Bill 551. This is a big step towards ensuring every student has the nutrition they need to focus and succeed in the classroom. Democrats also passed bills to help put qualified permanent teachers in every classroom. House Bill 499 by Representative Crow extends the Grow Your Own Grant program to incentivize local talent in rural and tribal communities to train and get the teachers that we need in every single position. Also, House Bill 340 by Representative Romano, which establishes the Montana's Best program to pair new teachers with experienced teachers who can mentor them, also passed as well. Montana Democrats delivered for stronger schools this session, but we could have done more. The Bipartisan STARS Act will raise some teacher pay, but it does not necessarily meet the moment. The Republican majority also balked at opportunities to help schools keep up with rising costs. Underfunding inflation is making it incredibly difficult for schools to stay above water, and when schools' funding fall behind, students lose out as well. And if teachers continue to be laid off, classroom sizes will balloon and after-school programs will be cut. And it will be the Republican majority who will fail to meet this moment and be responsible. Montana Democrats believe in a fair shake, and we think we did that for our constituents this session. And I'm going to turn it over to Minority Leader Pat Flowers.
Thank you, Katie. And as much as I love you all, I'm glad it's the last time I'm going to see you for a while. So it's good to see you this one last time, though, and talk about the success we had in this session. We feel really good about it. When we came to Helena 4 months ago, and you heard us over in 303 talk about our plans for this session, it was all about how to make life more affordable for Montanans. We've heard it over and over from our friends and our neighbors that they're facing the challenges of just trying to make the ends meet. And we were laser focused on the components that we could address as state government. From housing and child care to property tax relief and health care access, we delivered real progress on the issues driving costs for Montana families. We worked across the aisle when it made sense, and we stood firm when the priorities of everyday Montanans were at risk. Because Democrats were at the table, this was one of the most balanced and productive sessions we've had in years, and we feel very good about that. Let's talk about health care. Democrats championed and passed Medicaid this session. Every single Democrat was critical. Every single Democratic vote was critical to getting that across the finish line. We didn't just protect the program, we secured it permanently. We removed the sunset clause so that tens of thousands of Montanans can count on their coverage without the constant threat of it being ripped away. That sends a clear message to the governor and to Washington, D.C. Montanans expect and demand the health care coverage they get through the Medicaid program. We also passed House Bill 398 and House Bill 399 to stop insurance companies from providing life-saving care. Now let's talk about housing and child care, another couple components of affordability in Montana. Democrats helped deliver historic, bipartisan investments to tackle Montana's housing crisis. It's not fixed, but for the first time in a long time, we're moving in the right direction with practical solutions and real funding. We also stood up for renters, passing a bill to ensure rental application fees are returned, because fairness should apply whether you're buying a home or just trying to find one. If you know anybody who's rented in a place like Bozeman in the last 5 to 10 years, you realize what a racket that has become, and it is really just an opportunity to take money away from renters who don't have the money to pay silly application fees. So we've brought that multiple times. I think 4 times we've brought that We finally got it passed, and it's a credit to all Democrats to get that across the finish line. On child care, new investments are on their way to make care more affordable and accessible. Parents can work and small businesses can hire when reliable child care is available. Democrats led on property tax relief. We introduced the first two proposals, House Bill 154 and 155. On the House side, Senator Carlin was the sponsor of one of those, and Representative Carlin and Representative Thane was responsible of the second one of those bills. They persisted right to the bitter end, and I think you'll see components of, for sure, House Bill 155 in what was the final solution there. The final plan doesn't hand out one-time rebates. If you talk to some of our colleagues across the aisle, that was their goal. They just wanted to write checks and hopefully create a little pablum to keep us all satisfied for a while. But we demanded long-term property tax relief, and that's what you see in the bills that we ultimately passed. We changed the rates, and for example, in the first year on a median price home, Montanans are going to see a 40% reduction in their tax bill. That's significant. That's why Montanans sent us here, and we delivered. Income tax, I think I'll allow or ask Representative Cafaro to say a few words about the income tax bill.
Hello, everybody. I'm Representative Mary Cafaro, and I'm here to talk to you about how the income tax breaks of Governor Gianforte's are going to contribute to structural imbalance in our state. When we were on the doors, I, and I'm sure my colleagues, did not hear from one Montanan that they needed an income tax break. But what we did hear is they needed help with their property taxes to make life more affordable. They needed to have more affordable housing and childcare so that they could go to work. The main issue is property taxes, not income taxes. It's not fair to the overwhelming majority of working families because the majority of the tax break will go to the top wealthiest millionaires and multimillionaires of Montana, not to the folks that are trying to raise their children, have access to the American dream by buying a home and making life better for their children. So again, Gianforte's income tax break was not asked for by the public, is not needed, and is very unfair to the majority of the working families in Montana.
Thank you, Representative. Just a couple of closing comments. This session really demonstrated that when Democrats lead, Montanans win. We were able to craft some solutions on both the House and the Senate side with Democrats in the lead that really delivered for Montanans. And I think now the governor has a choice. He can keep standing with working Montanans or stand in the way. And we really hope that he chooses to continue at this point on the momentum that we created in this session to stand with working Montanans. We proved that we can make a difference, and we're going to build on that momentum moving into the interim and in the next session. Thanks very much. And I think we're ready for questions.
40% property taxes, that 40% figure you mentioned, is that for the year one, the interim rates, or is that for the first year of the full homestead?
It's the year one of the interim rates. Yep.
For Minority Leader Sullivan, talking about that last-minute effort to bring partisan judicial elections back, can you tell us kind of where that was coming from and if that was a reason for any delay on the House side?
Yeah, and so what I'm kind of operating off of, unfortunately, is rumor, but I suspect if you were to look, you might find something. But I had heard in the last hour or so of session that a governor's amendment could incorporate partisan judges back into a bill that would come to the House. And we had to work pretty hard to make sure that that wasn't something that was going to come back. And so I had heard within the past couple hours it was going to come back in one more time, in one more bill.
This would be for either leaders. How worried are you about the governor sitting back your agenda with details, either line item or others? Sorry.
I think the question is, how worried are we about vetoes?
What's the worry level?
And I would say moderate to low. We know that the governor's going to veto some bills, and he's going to be looking at the price tag on some bills. And so we're expecting that. I expect he'll look at our bills that land on his desk and I think give them a fair consideration. I think, frankly, many of our bills are consistent with the values that he described in his State of the State address, where he focused on child care and education. And I think he should appreciate what we're bringing to his desk. So I'm not overly worried. I don't expect every bill that we've got our name on to survive, but we hope that the large majority of them will.
Yeah, for Minority Leader Flowers, LGBTQ advocates might argue that some of their priorities were kind of left behind in the Senate. How would you respond to that?
I think we did everything we could in the Senate to represent those human rights, and we argued for them. Sometimes you just don't have the votes, and so we delivered R18 every time. We argued in support of maintaining their human rights and resisting what I think are just cruel attacks. And sometimes you just can't get the votes, and that's where we were in the Senate on many of those issues.
Did you expect to win those battles, and did you trade? Did you trade away those battles?
We don't trade votes, period. I know that's the perception that's out there, but the reality is what we focused on was shared priorities. So with our colleagues across the aisle that voted with us on some bills, it were those priorities were what we were able to put together a working majority on. Those issues, LGBTQ issues, are not priorities for them. We don't share those same values, and so it in some ways was not a surprise that they would not work with us on those. But in no case were we trading votes on bills. It's just not how we approached it. It was really focused on what can we collaborate on, what do we share values on, what do we share priorities on, and those were the things we came together and voted as a working majority.
I'm curious what we might see from that working majority in the interim, if you have plans for working with those Republicans who worked with you during the session. I'm curious about a special select committee, since we spent some time and energy on that these last couple of days. Is that something we should expect?
I think the challenge is going to be that the way they've restructured the interim committees, we have very few members as Democrats on many of those committees, so it makes it tough to collaborate. I think they've really undermined the effectiveness of those interim committees by creating a partisan majority. And so I think it's going to be a challenge to collaborate on some of those things.
Should we expect another special select committee?
I hope not. I think on both those committees we spent a lot of money, and we ended up with, I think, was an inferior outcome that just, in the case of the courts, just attacked and attempted to undermine the independence and effectiveness of a third branch of the government and the judiciary. I think it was a terrible example and a terrible of a select committee. I think it was a terrible waste of money, and I hope we don't go down that road again. And hopefully the rule that we pass in the Senate will prevent, or at least make it harder to have those select committees.
Yeah, can you shed some light on how the Ellsworth, back and forth factored into getting some of your priorities across the line, or hindered or helped?
That was clearly an issue that was a kind of a shadow over the Senate for a month and a half at least, if not 2 months. And it really, I think, was a challenge to manage the ins and outs of that issue, that investigation, and also get our work done. I think we did, in spite of it, we did a fine job. I think the senators who served on that ethics committee were outstanding. I think they represented our values of fairness in that process, and I think with that kind of expedited it as much as possible, and as much as possible allowed us to focus on our what should be our fundamental responsibility here, which is to pass a balanced budget and then focus on other policy issues. But it was a challenge. There's no question about it, and at the very least, a significant distraction.
Minority leaders, speaking of a balanced budget, that was some of the criticisms at the end of the session from the other side. Do you think that you presented a balanced budget to the governor?
We absolutely presented a balanced budget to the governor. If you look at what the budget looked like prior to the session, there was already, given the governor's budget, there was already an expectation that in 2029 that expenses would exceed revenue. So we were already potentially underwater given the governor's budget. So that's still an outcome that is projected, but a lot can happen between here and now. One of the bills we passed, House Bill 924, which created that Growth and Opportunity Trust, has triggers embedded in that bill. So when we reach a point where the general fund balance is going too low, it turns down and then ultimately turns off the quote risky revenue that's going into that trust. And so that's going to also mitigate the impacts on the overall general fund balance. So we feel like we've done a responsible job and an outstanding job of providing a balanced budget. And one of the challenges that lies ahead is, as Representative Cafaro mentioned, was a $280 to $300 million tax cut that goes directly to the general fund balance and the structural balance in the state. And that's a future that this body is going to have to face and determine whether that's something that has to be adjusted down the road.
I was wondering about, I think it was Senate Bill 324, we tried to motion to reconsider at the end of the day. Can you just talk about why it was important to try to bring that one back that had some play in the bigger picture?
Well, thanks for the question. Yeah, we thought it was an important bill. It did provide some funding for highway patrol, for bridge maintenance and replacement, and we thought it was a reasonable compromise in the end. Ultimately, we couldn't get it across the finish line, and that's just the way this process works sometimes.
I just want to touch on two topics, energy and tech a little bit. Sometimes related, sometimes not. There's a lot of legislation this session, in those topics, and a lot of bipartisan legislation. And just didn't know if the Democrats kind of felt like they met their priorities there, or felt like they accomplished what they wanted to insofar as energy and tech.
Like MIPA stuff, maybe?
Well, the
MIPA
one
bills? Or
Some of the bills, but also just a lot of the blockchain stuff and the data center stuff, and some of the Northwestern energy bills. You were touching on Northwestern that you kind of went through. Just was sort of after just general thoughts on either of those two topics, quite honestly.
The one thing that immediately comes to mind was or is Senator Pope's community solar bill. That is a huge step forward for solar in this state, and we are really hopeful that the governor is going to sign that bill and make it law. I think it creates the opportunity for communities across the state to develop a community-based solar effort. We think that is a significant gain in this session.
That was a big Dem bill that we passed, and so I focused on that one. I don't have much else on the data center. I'll have to look actually what ended up going through. Yeah.
Certainly, and then certainly Representative Cohen-Howard's series of bills relating to AI and things along those lines as well. It seems like this is very much like kind of.
That's right. Okay, yeah, we did pass. I believe we passed bills that address the use of AI in campaigning and in elections. And I also think we might have done some AI use for social media for, harassment purposes and that kind of thing, which are all good. Those are very big bipartisan pushes and all the right thing to do. I'd have to check the status of them, but those were good, and I'm glad we got that done.
Last question. I guess the relationship with the Nine is obviously going to go down in legislative history as a pretty big one. I'm just wondering if talk a little bit about what kind of relationship Senate Democrats will kind of develop with the governor's office this session as part of the shared goals those three parties might have.
I think it's a really good question, and clearly I think the relationship that we built across the aisle with Republicans, or a portion of the Republicans, was, I think, historic, and I think we were able to have significant influence on both the kind of day-to-day bills that came through and then ultimately on the budget. As part of that discussion, the governor's office certainly weighed in, and so we were aware of kind of where their priorities were, and where it was possible, where we shared priorities and we could align, fantastic, because that provides a better opportunity for our bills to actually get signed by the governor and go into place. Likewise on the budget, where we were able to align our priorities and agree on how we should be allocating our tax dollars to the needs of Montanans, where we have the support of the governor, obviously that would help. It's as with any collaboration between in this case, another political party, it's hit or miss. You find places where you can cooperate and other places where it just doesn't come together, and that's true of the governor's office as well.
Minority leaders, I know that this is a little bit of a hypothetical given the situation, but there's been rumblings about significant federal cuts, such as the Department of Education. What conditions would you guys support for calling a special session in the interim?
Conditions. I don't have a special set. I don't have a specific set of conditions that we have listed out, so I couldn't say, if X happens at this number, but we did, at least on the House side, I believe on the Senate side as well, has brought a number of resolutions and study bills that say during the interim, if we receive an amount of federal cuts in certain areas like health and human services, DEQ, FWP, education, that we would have that trigger an interim committee study that interim committee could then dive into it, see how it impacts the state of Montana, and report out. So if that's happening, we will be following it, and if something dramatic were to happen, Pat and I could get together and say, hey, it's time to go in, but there's not a specific number I can give you at this time. Yeah.
There already is in statute a formula for when either the governor would take action, or he would call a special session, or we could call ourselves into one. And that's statute 77-140, and it's specific to the budget, the projected budget shortfall, and it triggers action. So we already have a formula in place in statute. And so if the federal government were to start cutting funds, of course that would affect the state budget, and we would need to take action on that. And second, there was a Democrat bill, the Medicaid Stabilization Fund, and that also has a formula that is specific to mitigating cuts to Medicaid if we find ourselves in that situation.
Any other questions?
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thanks.
So much.